Hello, fellow civilized people, and welcome to the first episode of the Goths and Rome podcast. I'm Robert, and I am joined by Colton, and we are going to be discussing some clearly important current events, because apparently elections are a thing. In 6 days, a state best known for corn, pork, and beef production will have the first caucus in the nation, which, if you are not familiar with caucuses, is essentially a beauty pageant to determine whether Orange Man, Florida Man, some Indian woman, some Indian guy, or obese lawyer will take the reins of the Republican Party. As things stand in polling, the RCP poll data indicates that Orange Man is sitting at 52.2% in the polls, some Indian woman is at 16.6% in the polls, Florida Man is at 16.4% in the polls, some Indian guy is sitting at 7%, and obese lawyer is at 3.4%. So, Colton,
Yep.
big surprise here. Who do you think is going to win the Iowa primary?
Well, the numbers point towards Orange Man.
Yeah, Orange Man does appear to have a pretty decisive lead of over 30 points. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, polls are wrong frequently, but in every single poll that is being taken, he is sitting between a 32 and a 42%, excuse me, 32 and 42 point lead, which that's not the kind of thing you would see so consistently.
hmm
Uh,
Well outside of
I
any
mean,
margins of error.
I mean, in 2016 when Trump uh, beat Clinton, you sure he nobody expected him to win Pennsylvania or a few of those other states, but even there, his win was within the margin of error. He
hmm
just swung that margin the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see hell. If Trump died today, I believe that he would probably still win the primary. Sort of like what was the brothel owner's name in Nevada?
Oh,
Hoff.
yeah, Hoth. Yeah.
Hoff.
There's precedent. There's
Yeah,
precedent. He could win it.
there is precedent for someone being that far ahead to continue winning even weeks after they are dead. So I don't see a way that Trump loses Iowa.
Yeah. No, no way.
Yeah. So moving on to the other candidates, though, I mean, at least in the case of DeSantis and Haley, they've invested a lot of money, and well, a lot of other people's money, I suppose, more accurately. And so, just looking at DeSantis first, because or 9 months ago, he was within 10 points of Trump,
hmm
but DeSantis has put all of his eggs in the Iowa basket,
Yeah.
and given that Trump is the overwhelming leader in the race in Iowa, and DeSantis is currently losing his home state of Florida to Trump, and not by a small margin. He is losing to Trump in Florida by 38.9%. Do you think he will drop out within the next few weeks? And if he does not drop out, what do you think is the best course of action for DeSantis?
Well, I'm gonna go over the not dropping out case of events first. So,
Yeah.
some background, I guess. The thing that people liked about DeSantis before any of the election talks was just how he ran Florida. He's been effective, decisive, immune to anything the Democrats have thrown at him. And his biggest enemy since the primaries began, though, has been himself. And like
Yes.
he's not charismatic, he's boring. The stage is filled with characters and hatred, and Trump's not even there.
Yeah.
So I think if he wants to continue running, he needs to go back to being a governor. Not in the sense of giving up on the election, but to go against Trump, who's all personality and there's a big show around him and pomp. You need to be the buttoned up business first candidate. Rather than going up against him verbally, show that you're capable of governing. And he's been, as a governor of Florida, he's been doing that pretty well. People do like what he's been doing in Florida.
I agree. And just sort of an insider thing in the case with DeSantis is just how good of a job he has done in taking control of the Florida GOP and
Hmm.
making it function. A lot of people out there, these parties are just a thing they hear about from time to time whenever elections roll around. But there's a lot of inner workings, and it is one of the well, there's a lot of industries where this can happen, but it is definitely an industry, at least within the party structures themselves, where people tend to fail upwards
Yeah.
pretty often. Usually, the most competent people leave and go elsewhere, leaving, let's just say, not the best left to actually manage things. And
Yeah.
I don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people that have done work for the parties, and they're fine people, but there's poor communication is a recurring theme, infighting is a recurring theme, and DeSantis pretty much whipped the Florida GOP into shape, and that really was, from all the people I know that have worked with the Florida GOP, basically purely DeSantis. He really initiative and whipped them into shape. So, just as far as building an election machine, he's done that, and like DeSantis or not, that's impressive, just from a purely business standpoint.
Yeah. Anybody that has worked in politics before should be able to recognize how impossible of a feat it truly is to get local, seats of houses and chairs and in the local GOPs to work together rather than squabbling over, whose corner is whose corner, essentially.
Yeah. In I used to live in Vegas, and it was actually a recurring theme where the state Republican Party and the Clark County, the county that Las Vegas is in, Republican Party, would send out their newsletters each week, basically just shitting on each other. It was just, it was part of their charm, I guess.
Mm.
And to the credit of DeSantis, from my understanding, it appears that if it's the Republican parties in North Carolina and Virginia have both sort of, taken his lead in how they are structuring to keep things organized. I mean, there is a reason why Glenn Youngkin won there, and North Carolina now has a Republican supermajority in the state house.
Yeah, it's
I don't quite remember, but it's impressive what they've managed to do.
yeah, they're definitely trailblazing in how a local party should be formed and how they should operate with their candidates and with each other. They're definitely doing that very, very well.
Yeah. Going back to the question though, on my end, I do think it would behoove Santos to drop out. This is he's I don't have the numbers for it in front of me, but I know I've seen some numbers that show him within margin to be the number 5 finisher in New Hampshire, which certainly he has put most of his effort into Iowa. But if he's in that kind of position, he's getting beat by Christie, and we'll come around to him later. But that's you're not competitive if you're not truly competitive if you're in that position.
Yeah, that's just
So
untenable for a campaign.
so my personal thoughts are that if he decides not to drop out, he should sleep on it and then drop out the next day. Because honestly, I believe his donors have moved on. Uh, I think he was sort of like a lot of people liked him early on because he wasn't Trump,
Hmm.
and but he brought a lot of the strengths that Trump had within the party. And well, he in the first few debates he did lack a certain charisma. I don't know DeSantis personally, but it's I don't recall ever having seen him debate in a setting with multiple people other than just a one-on-one. So I think that might be a problem there. But I think DeSantis would be best served to go back to Florida, try and regain his appeal as sort of the heir apparent to Trump, like he was just a couple of years ago.
Hmm. Definitely.
Because I honestly think that whether in this election, if DeSantis had not run, I would have trouble seeing a situation where DeSantis could not have thrown his hat into the ring in a Republican primary and not been able to pretty much walk to the nomination.
Yeah, in a year without Trump and in a less crowded year, I think DeSantis would have been the obvious choice if he had kept up his image as the heir apparent, like you said.
Yeah. Honestly, I think he might be able to regain that, but I do think he's done some damage to the DeSantis brand just because he was sort of able to speak to both worlds within the Republican Party.
Yeah, he captured the kind of Trump populism that the American First kind of sect very much enjoyed, while also for the moderates and for largely anybody else in the conservative right, he was basically Trump with a spell checker, which
Kind of.
is it was their main complaint that he was mean on Twitter. So
Yeah. Trump wasn't orthodox in that regard, though I think that's kind of what propelled Trump he got initially.
mhm.
Just because, people were saying you can't say that, and then he'd double down, and then they'd say, "Oh no, Trump's over," and then Orange Man go up in polls. It was honestly, I believe that Trump is going to be studied by the political world for decades, possibly even centuries, just because he broke every single common convention and somehow he won in 2016. And in 2020, I believe he was the first case ever of a sitting president getting more voters than he had in the previous election and then losing re-election.
Yeah, that's it's everything pretty much going on regarding Trump is in an election sense unprecedented.
Kind of. All right, so moving on to some Indian woman. So Nikki Haley is currently trailing Trump by 29 points in her home state of South Carolina. She is only 12 and a half points behind Trump in New Hampshire, which is arguably one of Trump's weakest states. Chris Christie, within that same state, has about 10%, and I believe more or less around that with DeSantis. Do you think that should she overperform in Iowa, that it could allow her to cannibalize some of DeSantis' support and possibly bring New Hampshire to essentially a statistical tie, or possibly even put a W in her column?
Well, I guess first of all, I'll answer the DeSantis part. I don't think a DeSantis voter is likely to swing to Haley in any kind of camp. I mean, they might, maybe maybe 30% of them, and that combined with Christie's vote if he decides to drop out, which I don't think he will. Um, but in the grand scheme of things, though, I don't think a New Hampshire primary, even if it's a Trump loss, I don't think it really matters in the big sea of everything else.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, especially looking to somewhere like New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a state where Nikki Haley is a known commodity. She was the governor there.
Hmm.
Trump is a known commodity. They're both known. They're both well known, and Trump is beating her.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have any impact on future states. I could. I'm not going to say it's impossible for her to win New Hampshire. I believe it's probably the only state coming up soon that she has a chance to win. And I do agree with you. I don't think the DeSantis supporters would so eagerly swing to Haley. I believe that she has picked up. Obviously, you have the Never Trump, excuse me, you have the Never Trump movement within the Republican Party,
Hmm.
and I believe she has already taken those voters more or less from DeSantis. She's
Yeah.
definitely taken those donors from DeSantis. I believe if Christie dropped out, I believe it's a bit late for that to come around for him because New Hampshire is a primary, and I have to assume early voting is already started, given that it's only a couple weeks out.
Hmm.
So I don't. I think the door to getting all of Christie's vote is closed. But if she were to overperform there, then I could see her possibly bringing it to what is essentially a statistical tie, or possibly even a narrow victory. And I don't think it would have any impact in the long run. But she has dumped a lot of money into that state.
Yeah. And
And
kind of on this real quick, just before people think, oh, these guys are really for Trump. Trump is a statistical juggernaut in these primaries.
yes, Trump. We're not trying to be, Trump fanboys in this. This is just a situation where, speaking candidly, you have never really seen a primary where a candidate is this far ahead and a known commodity where that candidate didn't, you know, win.
Yeah,
And
if there were other, times like this, then if the Republican Party weren't so disunited at the moment or going through their infighting phase, the other candidates would have backed out with the amount of how statistically Trump is ahead of them.
yeah, I mean, there is a reason why Trump has been able to skip the debates and still maintain his lead. So, you know, that's just kind of expected. All right. Next up, I guess we got to talk about some Indian guy. Yep. Ramaswamy. All right. Credit where it's due. This guy came out of nowhere. He has, in a lot of ways, become a champion of the America First movement that Trump started back in 2016, uh, from being a complete political unknown. And he has performed very well. Honestly, I can tell you that 20 years ago, if you had told me that a Hindu was going to actually be getting a lot of recognition and making it onto the Republican debate stage, I would have called you a liar. And, well, I guess I would have had to eat my words. So, Cole, you and I both know he's not going to win the primary,
No.
given the current state of things. So, what kind of angle do you think he is playing?
Well, I see it. There's two possible ways you can take it. Either you take his word for it, or you take the political reality of it. And I'll go for his word first. And his word is that he says he's running to win. He's not running for second place or a cabinet position or anything like that. That is his word. So either he takes that and then he takes this loss on the chin and he moves up to next election cycle where either Trump is too old and doesn't decide to run, or he's ineligible because he's the president.
Yeah.
And you take that, and then he could be the heir to the America First movement. He could be a solid contender to a DeSantis if DeSantis hasn't already lost that status. Or
I
you
think you
take
might be.
oh good.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there. Honestly, all the time you see people run for office with no real intention of winning. It was one of the things that they brought up with Trump back in 2016. Is he is running to improve his brand appeal,
Hmm.
and there are people that do that, and it works. It works well, and people do what you need to do to boost your wealth. I wholeheartedly endorse this, but I do think he is. I'm not sure he's running for 2024 as much as he is running for 2028.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but has he taken any money from outside donors, or has he been funding this himself?
He has had to take money from donors.
Mhm.
I don't. I think it's mostly been small donors in his case. I believe, um, at least according to what I've heard him say himself, is that he is the largest donor to his own campaign. So at least
So
that's what he has said. I've not looked into the numbers on his donors. Uh, he's polling so low that it's not really that much of an interest for me to do it.
mhm.
But but do you think that he would accept a cabinet position if
We
Trump were to win?
Yeah, so let's go into that other side then, the political reality
Yep.
of, obviously the future's uncertain, and if Trump is looking like he's winning after a Ramaswamy primary loss, you don't know the future. You don't know if 2028 things are gonna be radically different. You might take that cabinet position, right?
Mm.
So, and that could also boost your political brand to say in that you have now political experience when otherwise that could have been used to attack you before.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if he takes that. I I I could leave that up to a coin flip in my head. What do you think?
All right. I actually think he's playing a very different game, and he's a smart fellow.
Mhm.
You're There are a lot of things you can say about somebody who's a billionaire, but unless you just inherited it, you generally have to be smart to get there,
Yeah.
and or cunning or some kind of good trait of that nature. Um, looking at these candidates, okay, right now, Christie. If he were to drop out, I would basically assume that all of his supporters would go to Haley.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Like you might see a few go to DeSantis. If Ramaswamy dropped out, I think it is a safe bet that damn near all of them would go to Trump.
Yep. Following you.
Ron DeSantis, I would say between 60 to 70% would probably go to Trump, and the remainders would go to a Haley. However, that I don't know enough, given that he's sort of declined a bit of late, whether the ones that would have gone to Haley have already jumped ship and gone there.
Mhm.
So I don't know that for certain, which is why I'm, saying 60, 70%. I think it would be more than 50-50 at this point.
Yeah, I can see that.
If Haley dropped out, you would probably see some go to Trump. And I mean, it's not a secret. You have a lot of Republicans that utterly despise Trump.
Yeah.
I understand it. I get why. It makes perfect sense. So likely as not, they're not going to vote for anybody in the primary, and they're going to probably vote third party or Biden in the general, depending on whether they just can't bring themselves to vote for Trump or the idea of a Trump presidency is horrifying to them and anything else is preferable. Uh, in our work, we've met them. Like, yeah, I understand their reasoning, but the question is, let's assume that one of these legal cases against Trump succeeds,
Yeah.
or you know, let's assume that perhaps the whole 14th Amendment thing that keeps going through. I personally think the Supreme Court's going to kind of slap that away just because, letting each state determine who can appear on their ballot would be a bit iffy, uh, just for national stability.
Yeah, wasn't that literally the prequel to 1860s Civil War? Like
If I'm not mistaken, I don't believe that Lincoln appeared on the ballot of any state that seceded,
no, he did not. I don't think. And
and
yet Lincoln still won.
and he still lost Missouri and Kentucky. they went to another candidate. But yeah, the question then becomes, okay, Trump. Let's assume that Trump has a heart attack tomorrow and kills over dead.
Yep.
Nationally, he is well over 50% of the vote. Santis, I think, depending on when that happens, there is a very real chance that DeSantis would drop out after Super Tuesday. I cannot see DeSantis staying in if he loses Florida.
Yeah, that would pretty much seal the deal, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because I it's still early, but I know I've seen some numbers that indicate that like Trump is sitting at upwards of like 70% in Nevada and Michigan and the whole Rust Belt area, where his economic nationalism policy is incredibly popular,
Yeah. So
and he's much more forthright on that.
what you're kind of angling towards though is that in case Trump anything happens to Trump, you think Ramaswamy is angling for that.
I think I think Ramaswamy is angling for that because if you are left with Haley and Ramaswamy and Trump, and then Trump is out for some reason, who do you think Trump supporters are going to go to?
I think largely Ramaswamy.
I believe Ramaswamy is as cunning as a fox. And
Yeah.
I believe that is his angle. That is my genuine belief as to what his angle is.
Well, I don't think any Trump voters would ever swing to Haley in case anything happened to Trump.
I
So
don't think that I'd say you could probably see some.
yeah,
Her her stance on Israel is popular with some, certainly. And but the people that were going to Trump, especially the independents who are going to Trump because of the economic nationalism. And right now, Trump is, in recent polling, is beating Biden by 10% with independents.
hmm
Now, obviously, that's going to fluctuate because we're early on and third party candidates are eating up a sizable chunk of the vote. That always shrinks toward election day. You've got RFK, I believe, with something like 10, 11%, which I think we both know isn't going to materialize in the general election.
no, not at all.
Um, but yeah, I believe that in that case, if Trump were to leave, if Trump dominates things fairly early on and Ramaswamy dominates it later, you could wind up in a case with a split convention. And that would be wonderful to watch for entertainment value. Probably wouldn't bode well for the GOP.
No, not at all.
That usually doesn't work well. All right. One second. All right. So let's move on to obese lawyer. All right. Chris Christie is terribly unpopular with Republicans. He has no path to win the primary. I know that, you know that, and deep down inside of Chris Christie, somewhere, he knows that too.
Yep.
So, what do you think his objective is in staying in this race?
I think he's literally he's there for name recognition. What he's been on CNN and Fox and everything. He's been in there constantly since the primaries, right? And about all
Yeah,
of the cases against Trump. I think simply he's just a heel. He's either there to denigrate Ramaswamy on the debate stage or Trump on the newsrooms. And then in the debates, he's there to support DeSantis or Haley. And he's kind of just his donors are just paying him basically to like go listen, prop up this or take a shit on Ramaswamy during the debate. He's the militant of the establishment during the primary debates and for the media. He's fighting and reinforcing whoever he needs to do so. I think that's his role.
yeah. I can see that. I I am not sure what his angle is because honestly, if his primary goal was to see anybody other than Trump, he would have likely at this point dropped out to try and get Haley closer in New Hampshire. Uh, just speaking candidly, Haley is a better candidate than Christie.
Yeah.
Haley is more personable. Chris Christie is bombastic. He's entertaining as hell, and he was a damn fine prosecutor. And honestly, I think you could replace any late night talk show host with Chris Christie. Name the show the shit Chris Christie says, and it would be an extraordinary success.
Yeah.
Just because the man is entertaining, he is, and he's smart. I I think he certainly has some, you know, political savvy, considering he won as a Republican in New Jersey. Admittedly, I can throw around the name Ed Durr. If any of the listeners don't know who he is, look him up. It's actually a hilarious story. So it's possible for a Republican to win there, but certainly not in a statewide race. The thing with Chris Christie, though, is I feel like he is actually running expecting Trump to win the nomination to try and get a cabinet position with, like, potentially a Joe Biden. Well, presumably Joe Biden, if Trump wins the general, if Trump loses the general, rather. Um,
So
I
with
think,
oh, can I go?
yeah,
So
please.
with what you were saying with why he dropped out if he's, on the side of Nikki Haley, right? I
Hmm.
think that his donors don't particularly have a side. I think, or they're undecided, right? So I think he's
Yeah,
literally there just to be a nuisance.
yeah. And one thing I have to point out with Nikki Haley is that she's got several large donors that are huge backers of the Democratic Party. I didn't write down their names before we did this. I apologize. But please look it up. I would encourage anybody who is listening to actually do their own research instead of relying on, two random jackasses on the internet. But yeah, my personal take with Christie is that he is running for a cabinet position, either with a Haley or a DeSantis, or with whoever winds up winning the election if it is a Democrat, which is presumably Joe Biden. But we're going to discuss that here in a bit. So, probably the easiest and simultaneously most difficult question is, all of these polls seem to list this fellow named Hutchinson. So, who the hell is Hutchinson? And does anybody actually care?
I would argue nobody cares, and maybe 12 people know who he is.
I'd say it's a bit more than 12. I mean, he's at 0.5% in New Hampshire. Um, honestly, I don't know why he's still in the race. Like, I'm wondering if this is just a bucket list item for him at this point.
But
Uh,
in all seriousness, no, he's the governor of Arkansas, right?
I believe so. Give me just a second. Yep, he was the yep, he is the governor of Arkansas, and he finishes his tenure this year. He finishes his tenure. Excuse me. He was the governor of Arkansas until last year.
Oh,
Uh, I don't see him really. We saw him on the first debate stage. At this point, I know nothing about the man. I'm sure he's a nice enough fellow, but given the current state of the GOP, I don't think he really has a snowball's chance in a Republican
he
presidential primary.
he's simultaneously so unpopular with within the Republican primary, and he's also simultaneously just he you can't run him in a national election. He's too much of a neocon. In this
Yeah,
day and age, yeah.
I feel like, he might have been relevant in the Bush years,
Yeah.
but at this point, I don't really, see him being a relevant political force moving forward. So, last question, which I guess is going to be, it's a bit of a long one.
Alrighty.
So, there isn't really a meaningful attempt to primary Joe Biden. So, there isn't much to cover on the DNC currently. But there has been a lot of talk about a last minute Biden replacement because of his popularity problems. Current polling shows him having an approval rating of only about 39%, which is surprisingly low, especially among certain key demographic groups that Democrats rely on.
Is that within
Young
his own
people.
party polling that low, or within a general?
He is very low. He has very low popularity among African Americans and young people,
Oh,
which are two blocks that are key to electoral success for the DNC. So, and this one is just an area I want to throw in here because I found it really kind of interesting. And to put this into perspective, a few days ago, CNN put their poll together nationally, and keep in mind their poll does actually tend to lean a bit to the left, uh, and it indicated that there are only three what they would term toss-up states in 2024, which were Wisconsin, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, which conveniently for Trump started him off right out of the gate with 272 electoral votes, enough to win the election outright without winning any of those toss ups. Um, if this if their polling is accurate, which I'm going to be honest, I have trouble believing, it shows Michigan as being a very favorable for Trump, but it shows Wisconsin as a toss up. That seems very backwards. And it also shows Nevada as going Republican more so than Arizona, which doesn't make much sense. So I have some questions about the quality of that poll. But just hypothetically, if this outcome appears to become likely and it is deemed for whatever reason that Biden is not actually going to be competitive, and even then, in the unlikely event that the DNC decides to take this move, what potential candidate would you personally advise the DNC to put forward to run against Donald Trump?
well, among the political frontrunners, there's one person that is notable nationwide, and that would be the governor of Florida, Gavin Newsom. I can't picture a Chuck Schumer being electorally viable, and I can't picture Nancy Pelosi being viable. So that is, among their legislators, I have nobody except for maybe like Buttigieg isn't a candidate. Kamala Harris can't run on her own. So yeah, I would say
Yeah,
Gavin Newsom. What about you?
right. So I do agree. From what I've read and the numbers I've seen, Kamala is actually less popular than Joe.
Not surprising.
And it's, yeah, I don't see her having a prayer. The problem I see for Newsom is that, you know, first off, there is a, trying to think of how to word this. In the same way that there are wings of the Republican Party, you have wings of the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
And part of Joe Biden's appeal within the Democratic Party was that he ran, you know, as, classic moderate Democrat.
Yeah.
Whereas Gavin Newsom frequently comes off as a member of that progressive wing. And I'm not sure he would have the same appeal somewhere like Pennsylvania or, damn it, Wisconsin or Michigan as he would have some other places. In a lot of ways, I think he has the same strengths and weaknesses as a Trump. With that being, Trump has a very high peak he can reach within the vote, just because there are people that despise him. And I think you're sort of going to see that with a Newsom.
Yeah, I can see that.
The On the alternative side, the America First movement essentially worships the ground that Trump walks on, and the progressive movement essentially worships the ground that Newsom walks on. So I think they've got a very high base, but a very low peak for support.
Okay.
So I do think, a moderate, if somebody was going to run as a Democrat, I would have to think they would need to be someone who appealed more to that moderate Democrat wing.
Yeah, you can't have the two extremes running against each other. People would
Yeah,
probably go with the known, which is Trump, rather than the unknown.
yeah. And it also doesn't help that in a lot of these states that, are seen as swing states, like North Carolina, I know is a big one. You have a lot of people moving into and out of California, but you've had sort of a mass exodus of Republicans. And that's part of the reason why you've started to see Nevada, for example, getting redder. It's part of the reason why Texas seems to be getting redder now. In Florida, Florida got a lot more from New York, by my understanding, than California, but still, you get the point. So, some of these states where he would have to compete that aren't terribly progressive have a large group of people who they might be independents, they might be Democrats. If they see him on the ticket, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you, oh no," and whether that's justified or not, that's not my place to say. But I mean, when I was in Vegas, I saw so many people going there from California that it was staggering, and especially during the whole coronavirus period where that was a thing. A lot of people left because of the various restrictions there, especially a lot of small business owners.
Yeah.
So that was a thing. So that I believe it would be a net negative for him. It would not bode terribly well in the general election. Not to mention that we have sort of established that Ron DeSantis has a charisma problem.
Hmm.
And did you see the debate between Newsom and DeSantis?
I did not.
Look, I had never seen Newsom debate before, and just because of the way he speaks, I had always thought, this is a guy that could debate really, really well. And then I saw him debate, and I was very disappointed. I kind of expected better.
So you're saying he
That
has
being,
that same kind of problem?
I believe he has the DeSantis problem. That because in that debate, I expected him to be able to, speak to hearts and minds to win a debate against DeSantis because that sells and it sells well. But DeSantis basically just bogged him down with numbers, and it felt like he was having an off time. So I don't know whether that was a one off. That is what I could expect from a debate performance for him. I don't
Hmm.
think it would go well. Although that said, going back to what we said earlier about Ramaswamy, how I think that he's basically running to take, Trump voters if Trump has to leave the race. I believe that I do believe that Newsom could beat a Ramaswamy. I believe he could handily beat a Ramaswamy
Yeah, I could agree with that one.
because I believe that in the event that a Ramaswamy comes out as the GOP's nominee, I think you're going to see a lot of problems turning out evangelicals to vote for a Hindu. I mean, I said the same thing whenever Romney was the GOP nominee. Evangelicals are not going to turn up to vote for a Mormon. And I mean, in the eyes of most evangelicals, um, the LDS faith is basically a heresy. So, uh, I mean, you know, uh, I mean, I'm from the southeast. They still think that Mormons practice polygamy. So, you know,
Yeah, it's just
take that as you
a
will.
non-starter position in that scenario.
It's basically a non-starter for them.
All right. So, do you have any
But I
alternatives then to Newsom?
I do. There are actually three names that come to mind. The first is going to, I know you know the first, and that would be Michelle Obama.
Oh,
That would be an incredible power play. She is likable. She is a good public speaker. Uh, Candidly, the Obama brand is very strong. Uh, While given some of the recent things to have come out in light of, a certain island, I don't want to give too much credit to a certain former president. I doubt he would be very much of an asset currently on political campaigns. But speaking honestly, Barack Obama might be one of the best public speakers of our time. And I cannot give him enough praise for his public speaking. He really is that good. He is very relatable. And unfortunately, the certain former president who probably shouldn't be appearing on the campaign trail is quite possibly the best public speaker in American history. So,
yeah.
uh, I mean, a certain former president could tell you what he was going to tell you, then tell you, then tell you what he told you. Could repeat the same thing three times in a row without making you feel like he was talking down to you or making you feel stupid. And honestly, that is phenomenal. That is a gift. I wish I had that gift. Um, uh, as it stands, Barack Obama is probably
The
the
next best.
most likable and most well respected. I'm reluctant to say most well respected because everybody loves Jimmy Carter and he's still alive. Terrible president, but arguably the most damn decent human being to ever be in the White House. And yeah, but I believe that Michelle Obama, as a means of getting Barack Obama back into the White House, could be a very powerful, well, be a very politically powerful figure. Um,
Yeah,
Lord,
I could definitely see. I hadn't thought of that, but isn't she a
uh,
lawyer as well or something like that? Or
I believe so. I don't know much about her. Um, I know that I've heard her speak some, and she's phenomenal. She very much has a gift in that regard. Uh, she would certainly energize the Democratic base that is not very enthusiastic right now. And yeah, I of the three that I'm going to mention, I would confidently say that it does not matter who the GOP put down as their candidate. Michelle Obama would beat them.
yeah, I could probably agree with that. That would be a huge page turner.
That would be, I mean, right now, suburban voters, Democrats are struggling with them. Not, not if you put Michelle at the top of the ticket.
Okay.
Um,
So who
Now,
would be your second name
my,
then?
I'm going to come back to my second name last, but my third pick would be Mark Cuban, the investor.
Oh,
from Shark Tank.
I was thinking the guy that owns the Dallas Mavericks. Same guy, right?
Well, yes. He and the reason here is because if he is running against Trump, which presumably he probably will be, or probably would be rather, he's got experience in television, which is arguably one of Trump's greatest strengths. He
Mm-hmm.
is a showman. If you are going to put someone on a debate stage with Trump, you need somebody who can, bring that same, not necessarily star power, the same entertainment value to the debate. Uh, and presumably, I would like to think that Mark Cuban could do that. I don't. I think that in a run against Trump, Cuban would lose,
Yeah.
but I think it would be very, very close. Uh, just because I do think that economic nationalism thing would still keep a lot of independence on the side of Trump.
Yeah. I
Now,
hadn't really
my
considered
my
him as
second
a. Oh, good.
my second pick is actually somebody who considered a run for office, and I'm going to be candid. I think they might be able to out showmanship Trump, although they're in a lot of trouble with certain powers that be right now,
Okay. Who is it?
specifically shareholders. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney.
You think he'd run as a Democrat?
Yeah, he was in. My understanding, he was actually intending a run in 2016, but decided not to run when Hillary sort of gained traction.
Bob Iger. What do you think his platform would be?
Uh, all right. Bob Iger has a lot going for him. Not He had a lot more going for him in 2016. Right now, the Disney brand is not what it was. There is a reason why their stock is kind of in the shithole. And Lord, you've got what's the guy's name? Peltz and one of the former heads of Marvel trying
Mm-hmm.
to essentially attempt a hostile takeover to essentially put members on the board of Disney to attempt to recall the current rest of the current board.
Yeah.
And there's reason for that. Disney has, not exactly been doing well. I mean, what is it? Like two of Disney's movies, if you account for marketing expenses, made money.
You cut out made what?
I believe it was only like two of Disney's movies that were released, in a theater last year actually made money if you account for their marketing expenses.
Hmm.
Just because you've sort of seen a revolt against Disney. I think it was the Wall Street Journal on Disney's 100th anniversary. Actually had an article about how is it really a 100th anniversary celebration if nobody is there to celebrate it, because they had record low turnout to the parks. Their movies dramatically underperformed. They lost more than $1 billion in revenue on Disney Plus just because people have seemed to abandon the brand. And the reason why I highlight Iger, though, is because he has become a known commodity in politics. So he is going to have a bit of an edge with the Democratic base just because of Disney's fights with DeSantis.
Yeah.
Next up, I mean, Lord, Disney owns ABC, so he knows everybody there. The man has to appear on television all the time. You don't become the CEO of the most beloved corporation in the US and quite possibly the world by not being a very competent person.
Yeah.
Whether current leadership is good or not, he did not get to the position to be there by being incompetent.
Do you
Um,
think that would be called into question with Disney's recent performance if he were to decide to run or no?
uh, well, the thing is, from the looks of it, it appears that a lot of the people that have jumped ship on Disney are middle America. They are not voting Democrat anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that it doesn't matter if he's lost Democrats in Kansas. Guess what? The state's still going to go red, and that would not hurt him electorally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, my I think it could be called into question, but I don't think it would actually hurt him within the Democratic constituency. And I believe that being perceived as a political outsider could help him to an extent. I'm not sure how progressives would react to a CEO running for president, given their general seeming disdain for anything in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe his ability to be visible and, highlight, certain social issues he advanced when he was at Disney could actually win them over. And, like, for example, of the ones that I mentioned here, I believe Michelle Obama could quite honestly beat Jesus Christ if he was on the ballot.
You
But
might be right.
I mean, he, I believe she can wield that. I'm surprised that she hasn't pursued elected office. Genuinely surprised, and I would wholeheartedly encourage her to do so. Um, just because, I mean, with that kind of public speaking skill, honestly, it's just, you know, it's almost a shame to see that go to waste.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
of these three, I believe Michelle would handily beat anybody on the Republican ticket.
yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that. When
I
you were
believe.
talking about Bob Iger, though, a question came to mind for me. If you want to hear it out,
Please do.
so when you were saying about bringing in the progressive wing under Bob Iger, right? It's been
Mhm.
known for a while that Republicans, their base, usually shows up to vote pretty much every time in every election, right?
Yes, they are much more reliable.
Well,
I believe, to put it into for listeners, if I can't remember the figures, maybe you'll remember this, but I believe it's in states that have party specific registration. The general rule of thumb for just to sort of display the rate of how reliable Republican voters are compared to Democratic voters. Um, I believe it's something along the lines of, if there are 70% of the Republican voters that there are Democratic voters, the state is a toss up if they are registered that way. I believe that's the number. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember.
I've
It's been
heard
a
something
while.
similar, but I don't recall the exact number either. But going more into my point though, when you're saying about the progressives showing up for Bob Iger or not, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that if Trump um, makes the nominee, right, that
Yeah.
that would motivate the Democratic base enough to show up and their whole vote blue no matter who, and that their base would show up in droves like they how Biden beat Trump.
Oh, I believe that that's kind of what they're going for now. Uh, what was it? The New York Post a couple days ago, their front page was a picture of Biden saying, "Have I told you Trump is bad?" At this point, like I don't want to shit on the Biden administration too hard for this, but Bidenomics has essentially become a meme.
Yeah, definitely it has.
Um, the was it? He tried to run, as when in I'm getting my years confused. In 2020, uh, he sort of ran as Scranton Joe, from blue collar area Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
and I I would not see Scranton going blue currently, despite his origins there, just because of economic issues. The the inflation issues are also a problem,
Mhm.
and I think it will galvanize like the vote blue no matter who crowd for Trump to show up. Yeah, sure. In the same way that Trump will galvanize the America First movement. They both have that going for them.
Well, let me put it this way
That
then. Are the two political movements in this country so divided at this moment that they can keep up that outrage no matter who's running for their vote blue, no matter who?
Lord, I'm going to say no.
No.
And the reason I say that is pretty simple. You know, you've got the vote blue no matter who crowd. And these are people who, it doesn't matter who the hell is on that ticket. If there's a D next to their name, they are going to vote for them.
Mhm.
Like, my grandparents were diehard Democrats till the day they died. Uh, my my great grandmother actually started crying whenever Clinton and Gore won the election because she never thought she'd see two Southern Democrats in the White House in her lifetime. Like it was like it had to be one of the highlights of her life. You know, she loved that. But there are issues that are currently going on that I think would, sort of turn off the either side really. Um, and I think we sort of see that right now with the Democratic wing. A lot of the younger progressives are very much more on the Palestine side of the current conflict in Israel.
Mhm.
And these are young people. And it's also not a secret that there are a lot of issues currently with military recruitment.
Yeah.
It's something like they're missing their mark by 25%. And that's a big number if it sticks, because if they keep missing that regularly, that's a problem. And I mean, right now you've got a lot of investment in Ukraine, and I don't want to get into the whole Ukraine conflict because that's just absolutely bananas. But it's going on. And I think you have a lot of young people that see, hey, they're having trouble recruiting. Oh, wait, what did granddad tell me about Vietnam and how he won a lottery and got a free trip there?
Yeah.
Um, So I think that that might have an impact where it's self-interest sees people not go. The other area where I think it won't would be also among younger people, where a lot of these are kids that just got out of college, and they don't I mean coming out of college these days, you're not making much money, and with a lot of college degrees, unless you're specialized in something that's high demand, you're probably going to wind up, working a fairly low paying job. And additional, 25% added to your cost of groceries, that's hard. If you are, like right now, I don't remember the numbers, but it is much more expensive to buy a house right now. Um, a lot of these things that are just steps people take in life have become much more difficult. And in cases like that, people go from, you know, I'm always a Republican and I'm always a Democrat, to screw this and just vote for whatever the hell's different than what's in there now.
Okay, so that's how you're tying that all together.
Yeah, I believe that it's just a case of there are certain factors that supersede ideology when it comes to, just living life. Would they still prefer, one party or the other? Certainly. If it impacts putting food on the table, that's a problem. And it can be debated forever who is responsible for current inflation. There's all sorts of arguments to be made, and I'd rather not dive into that cesspool. But you've had issues with, the cost of food going up. You currently have a shortage of diapers ongoing. You had quite an enduring shortage of baby formula. These are problems that, in the eyes of, the people that need those things, a matter of survival.
Hmm.
And in those cases, yeah, I can see that those impacting those diehard supporters more than a little. It's people get hungry. Just the nature of it.
Yeah, so you're saying both bases are vulnerable to this, and they both kind of need to address it and appear to not be a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. I mean, sort of pay one second to pay homage to the name of our podcast. Where was it? What year? You know, looking like back at history a bit. One of the things that the Romans were very good at, rising the cost of food, because it gave people a sense of security and made life much more stable. And it's just one of those commodities that, when there is a large impact in the pricing, people feel it really hard because, as it so happens, people tend to eat every day.
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those things that's felt much more so than a lot of other things. And what was it? Diocletian was like 200s to, there was like another, what, 150 years of the Roman Empire. And during that entire time, there was a fixed price on bread, essentially. So it's not something I would recommend any nation do, uh, by any means. But, you know, it goes to show how important and how long people have realized that those things are, necessary for stability.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah. Well, I believe that is it for our first episode. Thank you for chatting with me, Colton. And I look forward to the next time around. And thank you to any of you poor bastards who have actually taken the time to listen to us.
Everybody else have a great day, and I'll be sure to come back, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.
You as well. Bye, everybody.
Bye.